Well, good morning to all of you that are on the computer this morning. We're glad to have you with us this morning, too. There's Bill and the Perez family and Jessica and IPO, whoever that is.
We wish we could figure out, and Jessica has tried. She's tried to text too. Yeah, she's tried to text or whatever and doesn't get a response.
But I just don't want you to feel that we're ignoring you because you've got IPO on there. We're glad. Something that I would like to, I like to have different people pray at the beginning of Sunday school, but there are sometimes folks that would rather not pray in public. And so, if you don't mind, I'm going to try to ask some of you ahead of Sunday school. I've done that some recently, but I like other people to pray and to hear you pray and give you opportunity to do that. So if you don't want to, don't feel embarrassed to say, no, it's not something I like to do. But if you do, if I ask you and you'd like to, then please we'll do that. So, all right, last week as we were finishing our Sunday school lesson, the notes that I gave you on Philippians 4:5-9, there was a little section right at the end that I wanted to talk about because it's important for understanding part of what Paul is talking about in this next section of Philippians. And by the way, if anybody needs the notes for today from 10 to 23, 4:10 to 23, I have extra copies of them. Okay. No problem at all.
You have another latest thing.
We need the last one.
This is the last
Oh,
one.
I'm sorry.
Oh, yeah, you do have, I passed them out here. Just give anybody.
Anybody else will follow up? You have 4:10 through 23.
Yeah, some of you do, some of you don't. Don't worry about it.
Yeah.
At that end of that, of the lesson of Philippians 4:5-9, I talked about friendship. Ancient philosophers, and understand that philosophers weren't the kind of people that we're talking about in the universities. The word philosophy means lover of wisdom. And they were really looking for wisdom of how to live life. What is truth? What is real? How do you live life in a way that makes you happy and so on? And how do we relate to each other? And that I was talking to you a little bit about virtues and things like that previously, but they also discussed friendship. And they identified 3 kinds of friendship. And each of these is important. And the first one is a friendship of utility, meaning the kind of friendship that you have where you get something out of that friendship. Okay? You have that, you like this person because of what they can do for you. Have you ever had a friend like that? Things get tough. They're not really very good friends. If you can't do anything, or you get to the point where you can't do what they expect you to do or what you've done in the past, then you sort of get abandoned by that kind of friend. Well, they struggled with that in the ancient world too. People that, used friendship to gain something from somebody. I've had some friends like that myself, and it was a terrible situation when I realized that I thought there was one person that I once thought of like a brother. I mean, really like a brother, closer than my blood brother. But it was that kind of a friendship. And when somebody else came along that he thought could do more for him, he literally told me, he said, I don't need you anymore. I don't want to be your friend anymore. Literally told me that. And some other things that I won't get into, but so utilitarian friendship. Then there's a second kind, friendship that's grounded in pleasure or the good feelings that you have when you're with somebody. Say somebody that's just funny, that's just fun to be around. And you like being around them because they make you laugh or they make you feel good. Jeannie and I had, he died almost a year ago now. We had a next door neighbor. His name was Bob Shales, wonderful man. We didn't have this kind of friendship, but it illustrates the kind of friendship we did have, illustrates what this kind of friendship is based on pleasure. I would go over to Bob's house, and every time I would come home, I would feel better. I went over to see him, a couple of nights a week. I'd go over for an hour, and we would talk. He was almost 100 years old last year when he died, just a few weeks short of 100. And a wonderful man. And I would go over there, and we would talk, and he said, "Oh, you make me feel so good." I said, "Well, Bob, you're certainly returning that to me because I love coming over here and talking with you." He even asked me one day, unfortunately in front of one of his sons, he said, "Well, I don't know whether to call you a brother or a son." I said, I knew that his sons weren't going to like that much, so I said, "Why don't you just call me a brother or just a friend? Because you have real sons, and they, anyway, I tried to moderate, but he was the one that made me just feel good. And Jeannie as well. We both loved Bob a lot. And we were true friends, the third kind of friendship here. But you could go to be Bob's friend just for making you feel good if that was your goal. But it was mutual. I think I helped him and he helped me as well. He was a Roman Catholic, and we talked about the Bible and Christ a whole lot. He was interested and very open, and I know that he's with the Lord now. He knew Christ when he died, and he lived it far better than many other people. So there's the kind of friendship that's based on pleasure. Now, the first two kinds, utilitarian friendship and pleasure friendships, they're similar some ways. You can use people to feel good about yourself, maybe. But I think that there is a distinction that the ancients made when they were talking about a friendship that just makes you feel good. And then there's the third kind of friendship, which is the friendship that's based on virtue. And for New Testament Christians, that great virtue would be love and the fellowship that is derived from love. And this is the real friendship. It's the kind of friendship that Paul is talking about in the book of Philippians. He doesn't use the word friendship, but it's what he's describing. He loves the Philippians, not because they sent him gifts. That would be utilitarian. Not because they just made him feel good, which they did, but because of the great common fellowship, friendship, love, understanding that they had because they were all in Christ. For Paul, everything is grounded in Christ, and including that friendship. Now, so he's already mentioned that in the verses 4 to 9, Philippians 5 to 9, and we're going to see it again in some of the sections that are coming up here. And so what, I already answered the question, what virtue is the foundation for that friendship, for Paul's friendship? It was a friendship based on the virtues, on the good, noble, commendable, lovely things, of the excellent and praiseworthy things that we talked about in those previous verses. That friendship that is based on those things is true, deep, real friendship that lasts when there's difficulties. One thing that I learned over the years that over the years, not just in Africa, but here in pastoring in the United States too, that you almost have to go through a big crisis with somebody to find out what kind of friend they are. You know what I'm talking about? You go through a crisis and you find out which kind of friendship you have with a person. Because people that are utilitarian or pleasure friendships, they don't stick with you when things get tough, things get difficult. Either difficult for them or difficult for you, or some circumstance that you're in together that's just difficult. And so that issue of friendship is terribly important. Now, I ask a question there. I know that not all of you have those notes, but I ask a question there at the end, and the question is this: does this example of the kinds of friendship have the ring of truth to it, even though it was formulated by pagan philosophers and not Christian theologians? It does. And that's the kind of thing I was talking about, that all truth is God's truth. When these ancient philosophers discovered some things about human relationships that are true, they're true for us too, whether we're Christians or not. Now, being in Christ and knowing Christ deepens these things, of course. Somebody had a question.
We blessed her. She sings.
I sneeze love that bless you.
Oh, okay.
Automatic reflex. You someone sneezes and you just don't think that.
Then if you're a good German, you'll say Gesundheit. I don't even remember what that means anymore. I studied German once. Yes, and anyway. All right, any question or anything about those kinds of friendship? So I'm going to turn to the next section here then, and we're going to see this again, the relevance of that, verses 14, or chapter 4, verses 10 to 23. I don't think we'll cover all this today. Some of it is not difficult, but some of it needs some explanation. All right, so let's look at verse 10. But I rejoiced in the Lord greatly that now at last your care for me has flourished again. Well, if you just read that line, you could think Paul was criticizing them for not caring about him, wouldn't you? Or you could. But the next line helps us to understand. Though you surely did care, but you lacked opportunity. Now remember that whether Paul was in Caesarea or Jerusalem or Rome, likely Rome when Philippians was written, I believe it was Rome, it was a long way away from Philippi. And they didn't have airplanes, and they didn't have railroads. They didn't even have cars. The closest thing you could get was horseback or chariot. And very few people had chariots, of course. Most people walked. Shoe leather was the main way of getting from one place to another. And so for the Philippians in Philippi to help Paul meant they had to walk all the way across, or ride a horse all the way across northern Greece, Macedonia, over to the sea, cross the sea to Italy, and then in Italy, walk or ride a horse or whatever, all the way up to Rome, which was a long distance, like 700 miles or so. So it was a long way, a huge distance. So you can see that they didn't have telegraph. You couldn't wire money, as we say these days. You couldn't write a check and send them a check. There was no mail, no telephones. It was tough to communicate. Hand-carried letters was the prime way that they communicated. And the letter to Philippians is one of those letters that Paul writes and sends back to the Philippians. So even had they wanted to help Paul regularly, it was a very difficult situation. So Paul says they didn't have opportunity. He doesn't explain exactly what that means, but probably just opportunity for the distance and somebody traveling there is the likely explanation for that. There may be others, but one good explanation would be there was simply nobody going from Philippi to Rome that they would entrust to carry substantial resources with them to support Paul. Now understand, when they carried money in those days, they didn't have paper money. It was silver and gold, copper, bronze. And it was heavy. And it also was made you very susceptible to being robbed on the road. You know, you couldn't write a check, so you carried gold and silver. Now, you know, not so long ago in this country, you know, back in the early part of the 1800s, paper money was, a lot of people just wouldn't use it. They wanted actual gold or silver. And those coins and things are still very valuable, a lot more valuable than they were originally, or their face value. I've got some silver coins that are about a half an ounce, I think. I don't know what they are. I inherited them, and they're worth something like $40 now for a silver dollar, like a real one. And anyway, so for them to help Paul, they would have had to carry money. Well, that was a dangerous thing. It was dangerous even if you weren't carrying money, because there were lots of armed robbers on the roads and things, and the Romans had done a lot to make travel safer, but still it was dangerous. It was dangerous from storms, from sickness, all kinds of things. So they didn't have the opportunity for whatever reason. But now notice that Paul says, I rejoice. He likes that word rejoice. And here it is again. I rejoiced in the Lord greatly. That's a wonderful thing to say. It's the only time in the New Testament where that word greatly is used. It has the first 3-4 letters of it are mega. Like mega millions, megabucks, megabytes, that mega. And there's a little bit added to it that emphasizes the bigness of it. So it means a whole lot. I rejoiced a whole lot. Why? Because at last you were able to help me again, to care for me. You know, care that's a big word, and it's what we all ought to have for one another. And then that word flourished again in the New King James here. At last your care for me has flourished again. You ladies will like that one because it's a botanical term and it refers to flowers blossoming. I don't know why I say the ladies like that. I love flowers. Always have. I took thousands of pictures of flowers when I was in Vietnam. That's what I did for a little hobby. I would go out and find wildflowers, some little tiny things, but had this really good camera that do close-ups and took lots of pictures of wildflowers, love flowers. So I kind of like that, but he's saying that, you know, you helped me before, but your ability to help has blossomed again. It's flourished again. It's come up again, and you have helped me, and you've done marvelous things for me. You cared, but you lacked opportunity, and now you've had opportunity. So he's expressing his appreciation for the fact that the Philippians have been helping him. And then he sort of changes the subject a little bit. He's thanking them, but notice it's not a direct thanks. It's sort of indirect. He rejoices for them for the good things that they have done. There's a reason for that. Because in the ancient world, and it's true in lots of the world, it's even true for us sometimes. Have you ever had anybody that was sort of a friend, and they would invite you over to their house, and no more than they invited you, you were starting to try to figure out, well, now they invited me to their house, I've got to invite them back. You ever done that? And you're trying to keep track, or you have children that are keeping track. what you've given to the children, to each other, what you've given to all of them, and making sure that that's all even, especially at Christmas time. How can you get the bicycle? No, I get the little car, or something, But in Paul's time, there was a real social obligation. If somebody gave you something and you said thank you for it and expressed how much you appreciated it, it puts you in debt to that person to give them something at least of equivalent value back. Okay? It's called patronage. Especially rich people would give gifts to, maybe not poor exactly, but to their friends and everybody. And what they were doing was they were sort of buying friendship, buying supporters, almost in a political sense. And so anytime somebody gave you something and you thanked them effusively for it, you were putting yourself in a position where you had to return that gift or more, not the same gift, of course, but something like it, something of value. You were obligated then to give something back to them of equal value or more. And so, friendship, the giving thing was not just appreciating somebody and not just doing it out of love. A lot of times it was that one of those things in that utilitarian friendship we were talking about. So that's why Paul doesn't directly thank the Philippians. Now he's thanking them. He's appreciating what they have done. But he has to be careful how he does it, because he is not in a position as a missionary in prison to reciprocate the gift. You follow? He can't reciprocate it. He doesn't have the resources. And that's why they're sending the resource. But he doesn't want to give a misimpression. And so that's what part of the issue here. Now, in verse 11, to start to clarify this a little bit, he says, not that I speak in regard to need, for I have learned in whatever state I am to be content. It's not that I have need, that I need you to help me. Now, he's appreciative that they helped him, understand. But it's not because he has need. Why? Because in all the ups and downs, the experiences that Paul's had in his life, especially as a Christian missionary, there is much that Paul experienced that we're not told about even in the book of Acts. Shipwrecked 3 times, beaten with a rod so many times, and all those things that he lists in 1 Corinthians 11, or 2 Corinthians 10, 11. There's all kinds of things that he'd experienced that we don't even, that are not recorded in Acts. Bad things and some good things. And he learned to be content in whatever condition he found himself. Can you say that? It's pretty tough thing to say, honestly. But I've learned to be content whatever the circumstances are in my life. I'm not sure that I can say that all the time. But he had to learn. And why could he do that? There's a secret to that. We'll talk about that in a minute. But he's not talking about need. He's not thanking them so that they'll give him something else, or saying he appreciates him so that they'll give something else to him again. That's not what he's doing here. He said, I know, in verse 12, I know how to be abased. That's humiliated, or live in humble circumstances. I know how to abound. You can live in poverty. You can live with relative wealth. Now, Paul was never a rich man, never desired to be a rich man, but there were times when he had plenty of resources, which he has now he's going to say, because the Philippians helped him, he's got abundant resources now, that because they did all that they could do. He says, everywhere and in all things I have learned both to be full and to be hungry. Both to abound and to suffer need. To me, this is one of those, I have always, when I read these passages, I said, Lord, help me to be like that. Whatever my circumstances, let me have a sense of contentment and joy. Because this is a difficult thing to do. That's why we complain so much about things. Now, in that verse 12, he says, everywhere in all things I have learned, both to be full and so. That word learned is a different word than is used most of the time in the New Testament. Like disciples learn from their master. The disciples learn from Jesus. The word disciple means to be a learner. Somebody who follows a teacher to learn from them. And so Jesus' disciples, the 12, and then many others later on, were learners, following in the paths of Jesus to learn from him. This word translated learn here, means to learn the secrets. It was used of learning the secrets of a cult or a religion, being initiated into the secrets, like if you go into the Masonic Lodge, say, you have to learn the secrets of the Masons and the things that are there. There may be other organizations where they, I'm not talking about bad things, I'm talking about, but there are rituals and secrets that a group may have, that just among themselves, some groups have special handshakes. In the churches in Africa, we had handshakes that we used. We had greetings that people outside didn't use. They weren't secret. We didn't try to hide them from anybody. But people that would just come to visit, what more of that? Shalom, Yanuya. The word shalom, Hebrew, Yanuya means something like yes, brother, something like that. Just little things like that. But there were cults, they called mystery cults. And mystery means something that is unknown. And it's used Paul uses it in the scriptures to describe the mysteries of Christ that has now been revealed. Well, this word translated learn means to learn a secret. He's talking about that there is a secret to learning to be content. It's an open secret in the church, of course. What do you think that secret is? Anybody? What do you think that secret is?
Confidence in Christ.
Okay. Well, you don't have to guess because it's in verse 13. The secret's in verse 13. That's why I said it's an open secret. And that's exactly what she said there. I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Paul is not talking about, when he's hungry, he doesn't feel hungry and doesn't have some agony and hunger pains. He's not talking about when he's gotten beaten while he's on the road or shipwrecked all those times. He's not talking about that those weren't bad things and difficult things to live with. He's saying that even in those circumstances, I can find joy and peace in Christ. Why? Because he strengthens me. And I can do all things that I need to do, that the Lord wants me to do, because of the strength that Christ gives me. We're back to the same thing we've said over and over and over, and that is that everything that Paul believes and taught and lived was Christ-centered. And this is Christ-centered too. This is the secret. Christ is the one who strengthens you. And because of that, you can do everything that the Lord wants you to do and be happy and content while you're doing it. What is worse than somebody that's doing something good, but they're doing it with a sourpuss face? Anybody here ever been guilty of that? I used to, as a pastor, former pastor, I used to, there would be Sundays when I didn't really want to preach that Sunday. I really wasn't in the mood. I really wasn't happy about doing it. I used to say, well, there's nothing worse than having nothing to say and getting up and saying it. I think all pastors have days like that. Now, it's surprising that sometimes it's on those very days when you just don't feel adequate to what you're doing. You don't feel like you know enough. Something's wrong in your family or something, and you just wish you weren't there. It's sometimes in those very days that the Lord will move most. Because you kind of get out of the way. Well, Lord, I don't have anything to offer today, so this is up to you. And he does sometimes. I could tell you a story or two about that, but I don't think I want to take the time today. So, but isn't this a wonderful lesson? To learn to be content in whatever circumstances you're in. Whether you're rich or poor, whether you've been humiliated or lifted up. Do you think that there is a danger? Well, let me put it this way. Which danger do you think is greatest? The danger of being humiliated and poor, or being rich and prosperous? Which one is most spiritually threatening? Prosperity, probably. Because when you're poor, humiliated, where do you turn but to the Lord in those circumstances? But prosperity, and Paul is not putting that down here, that kind of prosperity, but you can be too prosperous and then begin to say, well, you know, it's because I'm a great preacher, a great missionary, that I've got all the support I need, and I don't need anything else. And you can almost get to where you don't think you need the Lord either. A lot of people do that. Prosperity can be a great, great danger. And prosperous living can cause you to be discontented. I put a couple of references there that demonstrate that from the Bible, in Ecclesiastes and in 1 Timothy there in the notes. They're under verse 4:12. Because those things, there can be danger both directions. Have you ever noticed that rich people are greedy sometimes? They never have enough. Well, not usually, Jeannie. They want a whole lot more. You're right. Whatever they've got, there's got to be more, whether it's a little more or a lot more or what. You know, you watch some of these, there's lots of movies based on that kind of thing, where people destroy themselves by continuing. They're never satisfied. They always got to have some more. They've got billions of dollars. You could name some billionaires in the world today in this country that seem to be like that too. The people that run Amazon and Google and Facebook and all that. They've got billions of dollars, and yet, do they reduce the prices of their services? No, they want to just keep right on making more billions and do what with it? By political power, usually. So, the danger of excessive, but can a poor person be greedy? Sure they can. We often think that the poor are the ones that's the greediest because they don't have and they want. It's a problem either direction, to be in either situation. But what Paul is saying is because of Christ, whatever the circumstances of life are, we can be content. And I'm going to leave that with you today because I think that is a great, great lesson. Interestingly enough, when I left for Africa in 1976, when Joan and I left for Africa the first time, went to Ghana, my father bought me a new Bible, a little one I could carry easily. And he wrote Philippians 4:13 in the front of it. And always treasure that because of that. Because he wanted me to be content in whatever the circumstances I was about to face there, or what we were about to face. All right, we'll pick up with the rest of Philippians next week. The rest of it is not real difficult, but I would like to ask you to do something for next week. I would like you to read through Philippians again and pick out 2 or 3 things, major issues, major things that you have learned from this book. How has this book blessed you as we have studied? It doesn't have to be some of the big theological things over there, of course, but there may be something that just struck you that you learned from Philippians that's going to help you. And I'd like to just kind of spend some time discussing some of those and giving you the chance to talk to us about what you learned from Philippians. It might take even more than a week to do that, but I'd like to do that. So be thinking about that. Read through the book and remind yourself, what have I learned from this? How is this going to help me? I knew that Philippians was a book of joy, but it really, I shared with you a few weeks ago, it really has struck me how important joy is and to be rejoicing in the Lord always, in everything. And that goes along with you can rejoice because you're content in your circumstances. So God bless all of you. We'll do that next week.
The God is in control.
Yep, absolutely.
Mr. Shockley.
Thank you.